Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you're having a good morning here. I just need a bit more coffee. Okay. Okay. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 23. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon advanced against Jerusalem and laid it under siege. Now the Lord delivered King Jehoiakim of Judah into his power, along with some of the vessels of the temple of God. He brought them to the land of Babylonia, to the temple of his God, and put the vessels in the treasury of his God. The king commanded Ashpenaz, who was in charge of his court officials, to choose some of the Israelites who were of royal and noble descent, young men in whom there was no physical defect, and who were handsome, well versed in all kinds of wisdom, well educated, and having keen insight, and who were capable of entering the king's royal service, and to teach them the literature and language of the Babylonians. So the king assigned them a daily ration from his royal delicacies, and from the wine he himself drank. They were to be trained for the next 3 years. At the end of that time, they were to enter the king's service. As it turned out, among these young men were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But the overseer of the court officials renamed them. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar. Hananiah he named Shadrach. Mishael he named Meshach. And Azariah he named Abednego. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the royal delicacies or the royal wine. He therefore asked the overseer of the court officials for permission not to defile himself. Then God made the overseer of the court officials sympathetic to Daniel. But he responded to Daniel, "I fear my master the king. He is the one who decided your food and drink. What would happen if he saw that you looked malnourished in comparison to the other young men your age? If that happened, you would endanger my life with the king." Daniel then spoke to the warden whom the overseer of the court officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. "Please test your servants for 10 days by providing us with some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who are eating the royal delicacies. Deal with us in light of what you see." So the warden agreed to their proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, their appearance was better, and their bodies were healthier than all the young men who had been eating the royal delicacies. So the warden removed the delicacies and the wine from their diet, and gave them a diet of vegetables instead. Now, as for these 4 young men, God endowed them with knowledge and skill in all sorts of literature and wisdom, and Daniel had insight into all kinds of visions and dreams. When the time appointed by the king arrived, the overseer of the court officials brought them into Nebuchadnezzar's presence. When the king spoke with them, he did not find among the entire group anyone like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, or Azariah, so they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and insight the king asked them about, he found them to be 10 times better than any of the magicians and astrologers that were in his entire empire. Now Daniel lived on until the 1st year of Cyrus the king. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had many dreams. His mind was disturbed, and he suffered from insomnia. The king issued an order to summon the magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and wise men in order to explain his dreams to him. So they came and waited the king's instructions. The king told them, "I have had a dream, and I am anxious to understand the dream." The wise men replied to the king, "What follows is in Aramaic. O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will disclose its interpretation." The king replied to the wise men, "My decision is firm. If you do not inform me of both the dream and its interpretation, you will be dismembered, and your homes reduced to rubble. But if you can disclose the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts, a reward, and considerable honor. So disclose to me the dream and its interpretation." They again replied, "Let the king inform us of the dream, then we will disclose its interpretation." The king replied, "I know for sure that you are attempting to gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you don't inform me of the dream, there is only one thing that is going to happen to you, for you have agreed among yourselves to report to me something false and deceitful until such time as things might change. So tell me the dream, and I will have confidence that you can disclose its interpretation." The wise men replied to the king, "There is no man on earth who is able to disclose the king's secret. For no king, regardless of his position and power, has ever requested such a thing from any magician, astrologer, or wise man. What the king is asking is too difficult, and no one exists who can disclose it to the king except the gods, but they do not live among mortals." Because of this, the king got furiously angry and gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So a decree went out, and the wise men were about to be executed. They also sought Daniel and his friends so that they could be executed. Then Daniel spoke with prudent counsel to Arioch, who was in charge of the king's executioners, and who had gone out to execute the wise men of Babylon. He inquired of Arioch, the king's deputy, "Why is the decree from the king so urgent?" Then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel went in and requested the king to grant him time that he might disclose the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his home and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, of the matter. He asked them to pray for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then in a night vision the mystery was revealed to Daniel. So Daniel praised the God of heaven, saying, "Let the name of God be praised forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. He changes times and seasons, deposing some kings and establishing others. He gives wisdom to the wise. He imparts knowledge to those with understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light resides with him. O God of my fathers, I acknowledge and glorify you, for you have bestowed wisdom and power on me. Now you have enabled me to understand what I requested from you, for you have enabled me to understand the king's dilemma." Cool. I enjoy the narrative here in Daniel. Interesting to me that we commonly know Daniel by his name, Daniel, not Belteshazzar, but we commonly know the rest of them, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I think, yeah. This second part here in the first chapter of Daniel shows that Daniel is still remembers and still serves the God of Israel in Babylon, and that he's attempting to honor the God of Israel by not defiling himself with the food and drink that the king is offering. And this is all happening before Judah has fallen. Interesting. Okay. Let's carry on. 1 Peter chapter 3. verse 8, through chapter 4, verse 6. Finally, all of you, be harmonious, sympathetic, affectionate, compassionate, and humble. Do not return evil for evil or insult for insult, but instead bless others, because you are called to inherit a blessing. For the one who wants to love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from uttering deceit. And he must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer, but the Lord's face is against those who do evil. For who is going to harm you if you are devoted to what is good? But in fact, if you happen to suffer for doing what is right, you are blessed. But do not be terrified of them or be shaken. But set Christ apart as Lord in your hearts, and always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks about the hope you possess. Yet do it with courtesy and respect. Keep a good conscience, so that those who slander your good conduct in Christ may be put to shame when they accuse you. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if God wills it, than for doing evil, because Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, to bring you to God, by being put to death in the flesh, but by being made alive in the Spirit. If he went and preached to the spirits in prison, he went and preached to the spirits in prison, after they were disobedient long ago, when God patiently waited in the days of Noah as an ark was being constructed. In the ark, a few, that is, 8 souls, were delivered through water. And this prefigured baptism, which now saves you, not the washing off of physical dirt, but the pledge of a good conscience to God, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who went into heaven, and is at the right hand of God with angels and authorities and powers subject to him. So, since Christ suffered in the flesh, you also arm yourselves with the same attitude, because the one who has suffered in the flesh has finished with sin, in that he spends the rest of his time on earth concerned about the will of God and not human desires. For the time that has passed was sufficient for you to do what the non-Christians desire. You lived then in debauchery, evil desires, drunkenness, carousing, drinking bouts, and wanton idolatries. So they are astonished when you do not rush with them into the same flood of wickedness, and they vilify you. They will face a reckoning before Jesus Christ, who stands ready to judge the living and the dead. Now it was for this very purpose that the gospel was preached to those who are now dead, so that, though they were judged in the flesh by human standards, they may live spiritually by God's standards. That's an interesting passage. That in 1 Peter 3:19, in it he went and preached to the spirits in prison. According to David Guzik, apparently this work was done in the period after Jesus' death, but before his first resurrection appearance to the disciples. Jesus went to Hades, the abode of the dead, and preached to the spirits there. Though some have regarded these spirits as human spirits, it is more likely that they were demonic spirits. We know that their disobedience was in the days of Noah. We have evidence that this was a time of gross sin for both demons and humans, when there was an ungodly mingling of humans and demons. Apparently, the oldest identification of those imprisoned spirits understood them as the fallen angels of Genesis 6. That view was widely known and generally taken for granted in the apostolic era. Uh, we do not believe that Peter said that Christ preached the gospel to those imprisoned spirits. He taught that Christ announced his triumph over evil, which was bad news for them. For Peter's readers, however, it meant comfort and encouragement. Interesting. And also 1 Peter 3:15 is something to always keep in mind, I'd say. But set Christ apart as Lord in your hearts, and always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks about the hope you possess. And keep good conduct so that your witness isn't besmirched. Let's continue. Psalm 119, verses 65 through 80. Tet. You are good to your servant, O Lord, just as you promised. Teach me proper discernment and understanding, for I consider your commands to be reliable. Before I was afflicted, I used to stray off, but now I keep your instructions. You are good, and you do good. Teach me your statutes. Arrogant people smear my reputation with lies, but I observe your precepts with all my heart. Their hearts are calloused, but I find delight in your law. It was good for me to suffer, so that I might learn your statutes. The law you have revealed is more important to me than thousands of pieces of gold and silver. Your hands made me, Yod. Your hands made me and formed me. Give me understanding so that I might learn your commands. Your loyal followers will be glad when they see me, for I find hope in your word. I know, Lord, that your regulations are just. You discipline me because of your faithful devotion to me. May your loyal love console me, as you promised your servant. May I experience your compassion, so I might live, for I find delight in your law. May the arrogant be humiliated, for they have slandered me, but I meditate on your precepts. May your loyal followers turn to me, those who know your rules. May I be fully committed to your statutes, so that I might not be ashamed. Amen to that. Psalm 119, verse 71. It was good for me to suffer, so that I might learn your statutes. I think that's oftentimes I find that I don't really learn stuff that impacts moral character when things are going good. It's more during times when I'm suffering that I learn. If things are going good, there's no reason to change. Okay, and finally, Proverbs chapter 28, verse 14. Blessed is the one who is always cautious, but whoever hardens his heart will fall into evil. Interesting. That seems like a similar call to me as what Jesus said when he said that we're supposed to be, as believers, wise as serpents and gentle as doves. It's good to be cautious of things that deserve caution. But definitely not to harden into bitter cynicism. Because that's not good. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. Definitely appreciate it. Bye.